anonymous. We are legion. We do not forgive. We do not forget. Expect us. You're listening to the Anoncast, the official podcast of Anonymous headquarters. Expect us.
Hi Phil, this is Luke. I'm so happy because you did all this work to take care of the animals. You might be really sad. You will be sad because you won't see Smooshi anymore. Here, I want to give this to you. Thanks for everything you're doing. Marineland is making animals sick. That makes me sad. So it has to change. Make a difference for real animals. Sign the vision below.
And that was a message from 5-year-old Luke to today's guest, Mr. Phil Demers. Welcome back, everybody, to the Anoncast. I'm your host, as usual, Alek Heidel, and on today's show, we're going to be talking about marine mammals in captivity. Our guest, Phil Demers, is a former Marineland employee turned whistleblower and animal rights activist. A little later on in the show, we'll be talking to Phil Demers, but first, I'd like to play a documentary for you. It's short, about 15 minutes, and it'll catch you up to speed on what's going on at Marineland. It's called Into the Water.
Niagara Falls is the home to one of the most beautiful natural wonders of the world. However, it is also the home to Ontario's most unnatural wonder, a sea circus that goes by the name Marineland. Most people know Marineland as an animal exhibition and amusement park that has brought smiles to tourists' faces since 1961. However, not everyone loves Marineland. While activists have protested Marineland for over 20 years, it is only recently that former employees have come forward to give us a real look into what the public doesn't see. The public sees playful animals from fond childhood memories, while former employees claim to see these animals as victims of neglect, abuse, and in extreme cases, death. Most of these animals are kept in small cages that don't allow them to get the proper exercise they need to be healthy. An optimum environment is one that replicates natural conditions. This is the key to the animal's health. However, images appearing on social media do not depict a utopian landscape. Does this look more like a natural environment or a prison? Many who visit Marineland can remember the pungent smell of chlorine. When chlorine is overused in fresh water, numerous skin, eye, and occasionally lung infections develop.
Chlorine is basically a poison. It can cause all kinds of problems if it's in too high a concentration in the water. And I think one problem that it causes is irritation to the eyes, so that you often see dolphins. Certainly I've seen them at Marineland when there's been a strong chlorine smell. And some of the pinnipeds, so the seals and sea lions, swimming with their eyes closed because they're irritated by the chlorine. My understanding is that it also can lead to skin sloughing and other issues. I'm not overly familiar with all of the effects, but I've heard they can be severe when the concentrations are high.
Went into work, and I had on my phone an email typed up to the administrator, and I was ready to give my 2 weeks. And basically, I'd felt as though I'd reached my limits, but I thought, I didn't have the guts to pull the trigger because I knew what it meant. And I was sitting on a desk, and I could see into the hall, into the barn, and I could see one of my colleagues. And I looked down and I could smell it. I could smell it already. I knew what had happened the night before. Again, another instance of chlorine being dumped into the water. And it just beat me up so much to think that I would have to walk through there and see what I was going to see again. And I didn't have the strength anymore. I just felt sick. And I looked over at my colleague and I said, I don't know how we're gonna keep doing this. And he said, you know what we like about you, Philly? We keep throwing more shit at you, and you keep taking it. And that was it.
There is one particular dolphin in the video that I shot. Ric O'Barry calls him the most confused-looking animal he has ever seen. And Ric has worked with hundreds, if not thousands, of animals. This particular dolphin was an older animal, semi-retired, and relegated to this warehouse.
This is Duke, and when I first came here in 1991, it was really Duke that brought me here. And some undercover footage that Kara Sands shot inside the warehouse of Duke and all of the others. You can see, if you look closely, his face is all scarred up. You can see what they call rake marks. This is from biting and fighting. His eyes are damaged, his jaw is damaged. And we actually found a place in the Turks and Caicos Islands to rehabilitate Duke, and it wouldn't have cost John Holler anything. And he wouldn't do it. He let Duke die here.
I did, in fact, locate the tank and went undercover a number of times and shot a fair bit of footage. And what was in this tank was just, it was an abomination of nature. To find sentient beings, and dolphins routinely make their own choices and decisions. Orcas will stay in their same family pods for a lifetime. To see these animals listless, bored. Of course they were boring, because they had nothing to do. There was no sunlight, no fresh air, no natural currents of the sea, no normal socialization, no use of echolocation to hunt prey, no normal mating behaviors. It was just as if these incredible animals were just dropped into a little glass jar.
I've always had a very strong relationship with animals, and that's because I relate to them rather than, see them as a possession or an object that's not capable of feeling or having, best interests. In 2004, an 18-month-old wild-caught Pacific walrus was brought to Marineland. And amidst a very intrusive medical procedure, she was very panicked. And I put my hands directly in front of her face. And I'll never forget it, because her eyes, there was a connection immediately, and her nostrils opened up as if she took a big smell. And amidst all the panic that was going on, after this immediate moment, she began to follow me. And, this continued days, weeks, months, and it really proved to be a complete anomaly of a relationship, because here I was not training her to follow me. She was following me because she saw me as a member of her family. I had imprinted on her. This is a scientific term. She didn't have that fear. All the other walruses sucking flipper out of anxiety, all the sea lions, the dolphins, they all have that something ain't right aspect to being where they are. She didn't have that, and she developed a regurgitation issue, and she started to lose a lot of weight, and managing those problems was very difficult.
Things that the public has never seen at Marineland, any number of procedures. Procedures involving netting whales, restraining walruses, restraining sea lions for medical procedures, they call them. But given the equipment that staff was given to work with, a lot of these procedures were heavily improvised, I'll say. I'd say they caused undue stress to specifically the animal, but they cause undue stress to the staff as well.
Animals that are sick don't respond to trainers. They don't respond to fish. They lose that appetite. They become lethargic. They stay in the water. You can't get them out. It's very difficult. So you got to either drop the water and get a net to pull them out. Smooshi would follow me. She would follow me out, and she would walk across that net, and the trainers would jump her, and I'd run around the corner because I couldn't bear to see it. And, they would be lancing abscesses, which is like, you'd get a scalpel and pop it in her face, and then I'd hear the sounds, and she'd come around the corner, blood pouring down her face, and just look at me with those eyes, and I'd be like, Jesus.
Junior was left in that warehouse, 4 years old. He was a juvenile. In fact, he still had little hairs on his rostrum or his nose. Junior was left in that warehouse, reportedly for sale. But at the time, there was a surplus of breeding orcas. That or Junior was simply too young to breed. And therefore, he was a commodity, an unnecessary commodity, an unwanted commodity. Junior died in that warehouse 4 years after my first shot Totally, there's nothing natural about captivity. And honestly, if anybody tells you, well, but it's for entertainment, there's really nothing entertaining in seeing something suffer. That's cruelty.
If you are silent, you stand on the side of the oppressor. We will not remain.
There were so many different conflicting emotions throughout the day. Generally, the demonstrations that I like to organize are a little less structured.
The story writes itself and will continue to. They can't avoid the microscope anymore. Too many people know, too many people care. So when that killer whale dies, people are going to know. When one of those dolphins go missing, they're going to know what happened. When Marineland acquires wild-caught animals this winter, because they're going to continue to take advantage of these voids of laws, it's going to be thrust on the front page, and it's going to continue the public outcry. Having been there and experienced the energies that October 7th provided, I mean, this was an amazing demonstration. It was a very positive environment. The decision to go in there was not a calculated decision. I know this. I witnessed what was going on. This was a very passionate display.
I did go to the protest on October 7th, and I witnessed the speeches, Sherry DeNovo, Ric O'Barry, and I witnessed what happened. I elected to stay on the lawn. I mean, I was a former employee. I think it would bring up, and it was pretty close to the time I had actually left, too. I think it would bring up too many weird memories running back into that Dolphin Stadium where I worked for many, many years.
It was incredible to see that many people willing to break the law, not really knowing what was going to happen to us at that point, that we were all willing to go in there and stand together and speak for the animals. I'm not exactly sure how it happened, but at some point a group of people decided to get closer, sort of push the limits on how close we could get to the front gates, and we started chanting right in front of the front gates. I saw John Holler, the owner of Marineland, pull up in his car to the turnstiles, and I just yelled, "There's John!" And the next thing you knew, people were moving forward, and it wasn't storming the gates like the media said. We were really just sort of strolling forward because none of us really knew what was going on either. And then John Holler got out of his truck to come towards us, and we all just sort of went forward. As we were chanting, "Shut it down, shut it down," the next thing you knew, people were hopping the turnstiles, and we were going in to actually stop that dolphin show. And this was just an amazing moment.
When people got into the park and I saw like a lot of other people having those emotional reactions, like it was really hard not to like have this feel the same way. Like there's some really great photos from the day of people like leaning up against a tank, and you can see a lot of people visibly like crying and being really emotional.
Once I saw the 25 cops entering the other side, I quickly scooted down to the glass so that I could have a few moments with the dolphins before I had to leave. And there was about 6 of them in the pool, and each one swam past me and looked me right in the eye. And at that point, I had been on such a high from the crowd and everything. At that point, I sort of, again, was brought back to the fact that we were going to have to leave, and we were going to have to leave these dolphins there.
These animals are fabulous. They're intelligent. They have social lives like us. They feel like us. And it's just like removing one of our children, killing us, and putting them somewhere where they're totally unaware of. And they have to learn, or they suffer, and they pretty well die.
I really want to see Marineland just as an amusement park. Canada's Wonderland did that in the early 90s. They used to have dolphin shows. One of them kissed my sister. They used to have sea lions. I'm not exactly sure, but they got rid of them and became just an amusement park. And I'm not asking for John Holler to shut down the whole thing and go bankrupt. I'm looking for it to become an amusement park. I'll go on the roller coasters, but as long as there's no animals there being harmed to make money, that's what I'm looking for in the long run.
Realistically, what I would like to see happen is obviously improving the situation the current animals are in at Marineland or places like Marineland. Ending the importation of captive caught animals.
We need to end breeding programs on site immediately. So all their captive breeding programs need to stop. They also need to stop the import and export of marine mammals. So those are the two things that immediately can end, right? And then the eventual phase out and removal of animals, the deer, the bears, all the marine mammals to sites of care. So what we do generally in hinging this is we don't want them to go to another for-profit facility. We want them to go either to rehab facilities or to go to sanctuary settings, things like this.
It appears we can't count on government to fix this problem, and it is a big problem. We have to count on the passion of everyday people.
My friends can surf waves up to 25 feet high.
My friends make me laugh.
Some of my friends can see right through me, and I'm not kidding.
My friend is so much fun. He's so smart, and he always wins.
My friends love racing sailboats.
My friends have no problem hitting a high note.
My friends make me smile.
My friends have been known to save lives.
In fact, a lot of my friends are some of the most intelligent beings on this planet.
But most of my friends are fighting for their lives.
We need more laws to protect my friends.
My friends are in danger and they need your help.
My friends need your help.
End captivity now.
End captivity now.
End captivity now.
End captivity now.
Phil, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, not a problem at all. So, if you could, tell us a little bit about your background in as far as it applied to Marineland and your activities there.
Well, I'm a former marine mammal trainer. I worked at Marineland between the years of 2000 and I left the park in 2012. I began my tenure there as a marine mammal assistant trainer, and eventually oversaw the care of a rather large populace of the animals. I was in charge of the stadium show program and the aquarium program as well. So, yeah, that's about it.
When I first looked into you, the first thing I came across were some YouTube videos with you and Smooshi the walrus. The videos basically said that you guys had an unusual relationship, and it was definitely a not typical behavior for a walrus. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Certainly. So at 2 years of age, during a medical procedure, I tried to relax Smooshi, as she was very nervous at the time, and it was during a really heightened state of emotion. We were doing something rather intrusive, and in that moment, somehow her brain circuitry reopened, and all of that I am, so be it my sound, the sound of my voice, what I look like, my smell, all of that got tattooed on her brain, so it imprinted on her, much like in the wild, baby walruses will. Their mothers will imprint on the calf so that these pups can be identified in thousands of animals in these large herds. And so in some anomalous way, this happened between Smooshi and I. So she came to actually see me as her mother, which she still to this day would.
Do you still actually have contact with Smooshi?
No, for the most part, Marineland keeps her well hidden.
Now, when you got started at Marineland, what kind of training did you have going into it, and what kind of training did they provide for you? You had such a hands-on role with animals. Did it require a lot of education to start with?
No, none whatsoever. In fact, I went to school for audio engineering and what was then called multimedia post-production. And so that was appealing to Marineland because in addition to my having a scuba license, that was appealing to Marineland because they saw an opportunity of having someone in-house that could work with the music equipment and the music as a whole and work with the animals. So I lucked out, truth be told. I didn't think I would ever be able to get the job, but I applied and was told that there was a high turnover rate and not to give up hope. And within weeks, I was sized up for boots and started.
When you got started, how did you feel at the time about marine mammals in captivity? It's very controversial these days, but at the time, were you aware of controversy, and what was your stance on it at the time?
I was 22 years old, and at the time, the captive industry was rather celebrated. I mean, getting a job at a place like Marineland or SeaWorld was a dream for many people. And it wasn't necessarily a dream of mine, but, the opportunity came, and it meant I could stay home for a few years and save enough money to go off on my own. So, I was quite pleased to get the opportunity to work there. My first impression of the facilities and whatnot is I was not terribly impressed, but, as a 22-year-old kid, just learning the ropes and learning something that you know nothing of, you assume that there are other people that do know, what is best for animals and whatnot, and you assume that they know, and you put your trust in that knowledge. And so for me, I sort of accepted what I was being told as truth, and just sort of went with it. And it wasn't. I didn't become disillusioned ultimately until I started having a larger hand in making the decisions themselves, and seeing just how little oversight or reputable oversight there was. And you start to learn and see things for yourself the more experience you have. So it took me a great deal of experience to get to that, but ultimately I did, of course.
What kind of things changed your mind or changed your opinion on marine mammals in captivity? Were the conditions atrocious, or was it just the fact that the animals were removed from natural environments? What exactly changed your perspective?
My perspective was more based on the fact that the conditions were just atrocious, and they were just steadfastly getting worse. Nothing was being done to really improve their environment. And really, we started to see, animals would be born into captivity and they just would not live very long. And once you started to recognize the death tolls, and you yourself, referencing animals' lifespans in the wild, you start to learn that captivity really, it kills the animals. Captivity does kill.
It's funny you say that, because I watched a documentary today. I watched Blackfish, but I also watched a couple other documentaries on YouTube. And there was a part in one where they basically said that they present lies to the people that they're giving tours to, that animals in captivity actually live longer than these animals in their natural environment.
Well, this is the type of information that we ourselves as employees were fed, and we were the ones spreading the exact information. I mean, really, there was such little information out there, or at least the information that the industry would present or allow us to know of, for us to refute it. So, I mean, back in 2000, we're talking quite a long time ago, places like Marineland and SeaWorld really controlled the message, right? Through all the commercials and just the way that they did business. And in fact, many of the scientists that they employed themselves would skew numbers to favor captivity. So, it took a while to sort of break free of the mold that I was crafted in, but ultimately, my eyes did open wide.
I went to the Marineland website, and I watched a series of their videos, and they put together a very nice presentation, and their slogan is "Everyone loves Marineland." I guess that you would have another opinion on that.
Well, me and plenty more people, for that matter, these days.
It seemed as though a lot of the videos that they presented were very defensive in nature. It seemed like the information that they were presenting really seemed to try to disarm the public as far as maybe preconceived notions towards marine land and parks like it.
Yeah, their marketing was very great. Few people don't know the "Everyone Loves Marineland" theme, and as children growing up in this region, you truly are conditioned by that theme song. So many of our generations had a lot of challenges in breaking through that barrier of the information and the way that they presented the park versus what it actually is.
Now, when you talk about the conditions of the park, can you give us some specifics as to what caught your attention and what you really had a problem with?
Well, the problem that I had ultimately was the complacency that management had in fixing a water disinfection unit. The park itself closes in October and doesn't open back until May. So it was, I believe, late September of 2011 that an ozone generator broke. And so the water was now being treated exclusively with chlorine, and a lot of chlorine, and really concentrated doses. And it was making the water really bad. And basically, the complacency in management was that they didn't see the urgency in dealing with that or wanting to fix it on account of the fact that the park wasn't opening till May. And so that's when I armed myself with the camera and started to take photos and documenting animal medical records and water records, of course, the water parameter values, all of which were so far out of whack. Ultimately, after I quit and I confronted the management, that's when they ultimately dumped the water and actually started to do something about it. But it took me quitting my job.
So there were actually adverse reactions that the animals were having to these conditions.
Horrible ones, of course.
What kind of medical problems would these horrible conditions cause?
Well, in the case of the dolphins, who could never physically get out of the water, there was some permanent eye damage. Their skin was flaking off. And I'm not talking about a natural slough. Dolphins will slough off naturally, so a little bit of their skin sort of comes off, but nothing really of note. This was burnt skin that was falling off, and it was actually floating around the pool. You could see it. In the case of the sea lions, who couldn't ultimately choose to go in the water or come out, well, regardless of the fact that they were probably not conscious that the water itself was the cause of their pain, but nonetheless, they spent a little less time in the water, but nonetheless, they lost a lot of fur. Of course, all the animals were lethargic, so we would have to feed them a lot of Valium to sort of stimulate their appetites. There was some permanent eyesight damage done to, in fact, the youngest sea lions there. So to refute Marineland's defense that the eye problem stemmed from age, that's absolute bullshit. The walruses suffered ulcers. They had chemical burns. In fact, Smooshi suffered a chemical burn. She had inflammation of a flipper. It was really it was wide ranging in terms of which animals were affected and in terms of the degrees of suffering that it caused them. One sea lion, in fact, died. Now, it wasn't on account of the terrible water, but the last weeks of her life was her confined to a small little cage because we had to remove her from the water because the water was causing her so much more sufferings. So it was horrible. It really was a nightmare.
In the time that you were there, you worked your way up into a management position, or you were in a position to make decisions as to what type of care should be provided to these animals?
Certainly. In fact, I had a heavy say in diagnosing the animals. I mean, I had a really good understanding of the animals as individuals and their behaviors and whatnot, so I could really had a good, strong sense of when the animals got sick and certain issues, health issues. You can pick out in advance of on account of your having witnessed it before with the animals. So I had a lot of decision making responsibilities there.
I went to the CEO and executive team page on the SeaWorld website, SeaWorld in Florida, and I noticed that everyone running the show at SeaWorld, all the executives, they're all business backgrounds. I didn't read one bio that said anything about animals whatsoever. So what I'm gathering is you have people involved with the animals like you, and then you have a bunch of corporate assholes who really could care less and just want to make a buck. Where exactly is the breakdown between the people who care, who are working with the animals, and these corporate assholes? I mean, was that someone that you were in contact with who was pushing back? What I'm basically trying to ask is, was there anybody on the business end who actually cared about the animals and did things for them, or was it purely just money at all costs?
Well, the unique thing about Marineland is that it's owned by one sole controlling mind, John Holler. He made all the decisions. So really the line was his decision, which had everything to do with the business and the money, and then thereafter it would trickle down to the vets and essentially myself and some other supervisors that sort of tried to have as much of the animal's best interests at in our decision making. But ultimately, the line was probably drawn somewhere in the middle of the vets' decisions.
When you left, were there any other employees who left with you?
There were employees that had left shortly after. There were employees that left shortly before. There was an employee that was fired, and that I know of, both vets have since left, at least in the in how much they were working there, because I mean, we haven't seen them in months, so maybe they're consulting. I don't know, but no, everyone is essentially gone. There's been just about an 85% turnover rate since ultimately we spoke to the newspapers and whatnot.
Is there any kind of backlash to employees who speak out about this kind of thing?
Oh, absolutely. We've been sued. A number of other employees were threatened to be sued, but 3 of Marineland's former employees right now, including myself, are being sued in excess of $1 million each.
What exactly is the basis for the lawsuit? Just defamation?
2 of them are defamation. Mine is essentially plotting to steal a walrus and business interference.
Plotting to steal a walrus. Did you plot to steal a walrus?
No, it'd be just about impossible to plot to steal a walrus. These are slap suits. They're strategic lawsuits against public participation. It's just a means to suppress our voices and intimidate us and ultimately bankrupt us, because the fact of the matter is it's very costly to try to defend yourself against, very rich corporate lawyers who have no vested interest in the truth and more so in punishing you.
How long have you been involved in the legal battle?
3 years now.
And you left in 2006. And so if the lawsuit only came about 3 years ago, what happened in those years to bring the lawsuit about?
I left in 2012. I was there.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, 2002 to 2012. And then I got a call from a journalist, investigative journalist, who had a lot of questions as to how the walrus person would have left their dream job. And I refused to speak. And ultimately, one day I went to go visit Smooshi, and I was, unbeknownst to me, I was no longer welcome to the park. But I did manage to get in, and I saw her, and she was very ill. To sort of summarize, Marineland and I had an agreement that I would be able to come back and care for Smooshi if she ever needed that help, and it became evident that they weren't going to do that. They weren't going to honor our agreement, and so when the newspaper called, or rather the next day after I saw her in the condition she was in, I called the newspaper and said, not only will I talk, you put my name and face on every on the newspapers. I was not prepared to do it anonymous anymore either. The story needed some legitimacy. It needed a face and a name. And so I made that decision along with some other employees as well. And that's what ultimately led to us being punished. We sort of knew we knew based on John Holer and Marineland's history that this was a likely scenario, but 3 years after the fact, you want to assume that there'd be some level of justice or transparency in the process that would show that it's just an abusive process, but we haven't even gotten that far yet.
Since you left Marineland, what kind of activities have you undertaken in reference to protests or petitions or anything like that?
Well, I did create an online petition. It garnered in excess of 120,000 signatures, I believe. With that petitioned the government to create greater animal protection laws and standards of care for captive marine mammals, all of which came into effect January 1st, 2016, all of which are rather pathetic and vague. I've gone to the federal level, and we've proposed a Senate bill that is to ban all the captivity of orcas, dolphins, and porpoises. We banned at the provincial level. We actually banned orca captivity, so Marineland will never get another captive orca. We actually fought long and hard to get anti-slap legislation that would have ultimately protected ourselves. However, the Premier of Ontario herself changed the bill and removed the retroactivity clause because she herself had a slap lawsuit against another MPP during the election to sort of impede their ability to speak about a rather large gas plant scandal. So we lost that protection, but we did ultimately, the anti-slap legislation did get enacted. So journalists and other whistleblowers will be protected moving forward, but it doesn't affect us, unfortunately.
Have you had anybody come forward to help you? Any lawyers donating their time or any contributions to help with any legal fees?
Well, we did have a couple lawyers who are working for really reasonable prices. Of course, they've moved on to other things, so we've had to retain new lawyers. The majority of our legal bills continue to be paid by people because we've started crowdfunding our litigation. It's a challenge because there are 3 ongoing lawsuits, and Marineland, of course, is pursuing us on account of the fact that they know we don't have money and that we will be running out of money. But largely, it's the will of the people that have kept us in this fight. So we're certainly appreciative of all the support we've received.
One thing I wanted to ask you about, do parks like this offer any real benefit to animals? If you go to SeaWorld and some of the other parks websites, you'll see that they talk about conservation, wildlife preservation. What's your opinion on that? Is that real, or is that just PR?
No, the numbers that they will show you, if you look in contrast to or in relation to their profit margins, is really minimal. Marineland has never contributed an iota of conservation. All they've ever done is taken animals from the wild and put them on public display or have them entertain the crowds. I don't want to speak for all zoos and aquariums, but the most of them, in my experience, offer little to no conservation relief or efforts whatsoever.
Like I said earlier, when you search your name, you get a lot of references to Smooshi, but you said that you've worked with other animals as well. Can you tell me what other animals you've worked with and to what extent?
Certainly. I have extensive experience with, obviously, walruses. I was the person who was jumping off the orcas in the shows. I've worked with dolphins, seals, sea lions. I've worked with beluga whales. At Marineland, there's a rather broad spectrum of marine mammals in captivity, and I essentially worked with all of them and quite a bit.
Outside of Marineland, are there any other parks or any other animals in general that have caught your attention that you feel attention needs to be brought to?
Well, as always, SeaWorld thankfully has a lot of attention, a lot of scrutiny over their practices. There are a lot of zoos up here in Canada, especially in Ontario, that are really atrocious. And on account of the fact that there's been no licensing or any type of proper governing of these facilities, they've allowed to essentially thrive with really horrible conditions. So, as far as the plight of captive animals, every one of them has a story. Every one of them has a need to change the future. But specifically, I don't know. My attention is really, and all of my energies is focused on dealing with Marineland's animals.
One thing I found kind of shocking was how much PR is really involved with incidents of animal attacks or outbursts. I found a website, orcahome.de, and it has a list going back to 1967 of, let me see, it's got 151 incidents reported from marine mammals in captivity. It's just funny when you look back at some of the old newsreels about some of these attacks, how they try to shift the blame away from it being an animal attack, or if someone were to die, they were to have drowned instead of having been attacked. It's just amazing to see the PR machine at work. What kind of PR did you see come out of Marineland over this kind of controversial stuff?
So Marineland's policy has always been there was no comment whatsoever. I mean, Marineland, I have to say, got away with a lot without ever having to atone or explain themselves. I mean, even in the case of losing iconic animals, they would just be buried quietly in the mass graves at the back of the park, and really the local news wouldn't inquire too much. But bear in mind, Marineland paid a lot of advertising dollars for a lot of years for all print media, for all the television media, local and even national, that no one wants to talk about them. So they've been very careful in how they do business, and they've made sure the right people are on their side.
Recently, there was a law put into place in California, which is going to prevent the breeding of orcas in captivity. Are there any laws to protect the animals in Canada?
No, those are laws that we've sought. In fact, as we speak, there's a bill tabled in the Senate. It's working its way through, and we're hoping to get a little more attention on it. We're trying to get Justin Trudeau's attention and sort of try to politicize this thing and get people on board. But there is ultimately a bill that is prepared to stop the import, export, breeding of, and even transportation of captive whales, dolphins, and porpoises. And once that becomes law, then Marineland will ultimately have a short shelf life. In Ontario, we banned orca breeding, so that's a plus. But beyond that, Marineland really still has free reign on a lot of things they want to do with dolphins and all the pinnipeds.
Let me ask you this. Ultimately, what do you want to see happen? Do you want to see parks like Marineland shut down entirely, or do you want to see conditions improved? What would you do to solve this?
Well, I used to believe that improved conditions was the answer. However, the more I've sort of delved into it and expanded my perspective, I really don't think a whale, dolphin, or any type of walrus or Arctic animal or even sea lion should be in a landlocked southern Ontario environment in Canada. I just don't think that it's appropriate. We know that their lifespans are shortened significantly. So I do believe captivity kills. I know it. So I'm of the opinion that I don't want to see these animals in captivity anymore. I don't know that Marineland has to necessarily shut down, but I would love to see them phase out the animal captivity and then in whatever capacity move forward with their business, whether it be with CGI or some type of mechanical animation. If they want to keep an animal-like theme, that's fine, but let's not put that on. Let's not cause a bunch of animals to suffer to shoulder their business plan.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that pretty much wraps up all my questions. Is there anything specific that you'd like to talk about?
No, it would just be it'd be nice to get some support out there, and I'm not just talking dollars and cents.
Well, tell us, where can people go to find out more information about you and your cause, and if they want to help financially, how they can do so?
Yeah, visit SaveSmooshi.com. That's where we're fundraising the litigation of the 3 former employees. And if any lawyers want to get involved, we're making quite a name for ourselves over here. So, we're not the richest folks, but might be able to get your name out there. So if people want to get involved, just reach me on Twitter at Walrus Whisperer, or hit me up on Facebook. Anywhere, I'm easy to find. So, but yeah, please, I'm urging people to get involved because I'm a little nervous about the level of complacency Canada seems to have. This is something that really needs to be addressed.
Well, Phil, we're going to do everything we can to help you, and if there's anything in the future that we can do to help you, definitely let us know, and we'll be there.
Great. Appreciate it.
Phil, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'd like to thank Phil for appearing on the show today. For more information, head over to SaveSmooshi.com. There's another marine mammal I would like to talk about today to bring some attention to, and that would be Lolita the orca. Lolita is a really sad case, and it's been really difficult for me to research this topic without breaking down almost every time I read or watch a video about her. Lolita was captured in 1970 off the coast of Washington State and has resided ever since in the world's smallest tank of its sort in Miami Beach at the Miami Seaquarium. So I'd like to play a couple clips for you to inform you about what's going on with Lolita and the Miami Seaquarium.
Lolita was taken from the wild over 3 decades ago to be trained and put on display. Today, she is the remaining survivor of the Puget Sound roundups. On August 8, 1970, Lolita and her family were swimming peacefully off the coast of Washington State, en route to a ritual gathering of the Orca nations. Every year, the orca pods of the Northwest make the long pilgrimage to Possession Sound for the celebration. But for Lolita, the day took a tragic turn. She and 10 other family members would never make it to this or any other family reunion again. As a pod of more than 100 whales moved through the inlet, legendary orca trainer Ted Griffin and his capture team quickly gave chase. Speedboats roared out to greet the pod. An assault of explosives quickly ensued. Deafening bombs exploded around the family as boats and small aircraft attempted to herd the disoriented whales into Puget Sound's Penn Cove inlet. Attempting to protect their young, mature whales instinctively split into two groups and sent decoys to distract hunters from the infants and adolescents. The decoys tried to lead the hunters on a wild chase away from the pod, but pursuers were relentless, hurling nets into the water and trapping the panicked family in Penn Cove Inlet. The air was thick with the sound of screaming whales as they thrashed in the tangled nets. Piercing shrills were heard for miles, according to local residents Lila Snover and Barbara Stevens.
Sounds they made were what we really noticed, but what you really felt were the cries of both the small ones and the adult ones. And I remember one day I stopped over there right close to them with my children that were very small at the time, and they kept saying, "Why are they crying? They're crying." It just broke your heart, everybody that saw them. And you kept wanting them to let them go. Quit harassing them.
There was a group of people that even contemplated going out in small boats, like in the dark, and trying to cut the net and set the orcas loose, but they were being guarded all day and all night by people on the boats with rifles. They would pretty much shoot anybody who showed up and tried to free them.
It was terrible. It was just terrible. You felt like it was a prison camp. It was awful. And I think everybody that remembers it will tell you that.
It's just one of the most horrible things I've ever witnessed in my life. I became dedicated to orcas in general, and Lolita particularly, since that.
Yes.
Adolescents from 2 to 7 years old, the perfect age for capture and training, were quickly separated from their mothers and prepared for extraction. While desperately trying to reach her child through the twisted nets, one mother drowns. One last glimpse of her infant being dragged away, and she closes her blowhole and sinks lifelessly into the murky water. Her body was later discovered by reporters. John Crow was just 18 when he was hired to aid in the capture, and he remembers it very well.
Corrals are set up with net going down to the bottom on all sides. And then you have to figure a way to separate the animals, because you only want the little ones. And when you see that there's some little ones on one side and maybe there's more on one side than the other, then you take off with another boat and run a net and separate those. Also, you leave a circular net out to keep some whales in it, because as long as there's one whale in captivity, the rest of them won't leave. Kind of interesting.
4 youngsters also died in the assault. While charging the nets in final attempts to reach their mothers, they drowned. But their deaths were kept from the public eye. In a covert midnight mission, the bodies were weighted and hauled out to sea for secret disposal.
They had us slit them open and fill them with rocks and put anchors on their tail, and we sank them at that point.
Their bodies mysteriously washed up on shore on November 18, 1970, making national headlines and inciting public outrage. The outrage later inspired Washington state government to ban orca captures in Puget Sound for good. Surviving youths were lashed, hoisted onto boats, and dragged to shore, never to see their family again. A family unit as old as time was suddenly crippled forever.
My job, along with another guy, was to get her in the stretcher. And that was the bad part, because that was our last whale. So as soon as we left with her, where they started breaking down the rest of the outfit, and they released them then, but they didn't leave. They came right over the beach. And they just kind of milled about there. And they were communicating back and forth with the squeaks and shrieks that they do. And they call it spy hopping now, when the whale sticks his head up and looks around, and they were doing that. Actually, I kind of broke down and started crying. I kept working, but it was really too much for me to deal with at that point. And so we kept on anyway, and got the whale loaded, and they picked it up. The instant that whale cleared the water, where the sound, I suppose, didn't transmit through the water anymore, the whole rest of the pod of whales that were there just kind of like gave a big sigh and just swam off. That was the end of that.
During the commotion at Penn Cove, the call went out to aquariums around the world proclaiming there were whales for sale in Puget Sound. It was the largest whale capture in history. 7 youngsters were caught in all. 2 went to Japan, 1 each to Texas, Australia, the UK, and France, and 1 6-year-old female to Miami.
The saddest part about Lolita's captivity might not be her captivity itself. It might be the fact that her family has been waiting for her for over 40 years. They've been monitored ever since 1970, the day that Lolita was taken, and they still swim the waters off the coast of Washington to this day. The next clip I'd like to play for you is from a gentleman named Ric O'Barry. Ric O'Barry is a former dolphin catcher and trainer. He's responsible for catching and training the dolphin Flipper from the popular TV show. Currently, Ric runs Ric O'Barry's Dolphin Project.
She's not living, she's simply surviving. There's a difference. Living is doing things. Living is chasing fish. It's cooperatively feeding. It's, moving around 100 miles throughout the day. That's what living is all about. She is simply surviving in this tank, and she's on death row. Lolita and other dolphins and whales are self-aware creatures. They routinely make choices and decisions regarding the details of their life. They are entitled to freedom of choice. Thus, Lolita is entitled to freedom. Capturing her and dragging her kicking and screaming into that concrete box is simply wrong. What a violation of nature, and what hypocrisy to say we're capturing these dolphins and bringing them to the Miami Seaquarium or SeaWorld or some other park so that we can teach you respect for nature.
Come to the place where whales and dolphins fly, where creatures lurk, and where the forecast for fun is always scattered showers and 55 degrees. Miami Seaquarium, your window to the world of the sea.
What is that? It's so obvious that this show is nothing more than a spectacle of dominance. That's all it really is. And it teaches us that dominance is good, dominance is right, dominance works. And that's really the danger. That's the biggest problem. Because it's not just an animal rights issue, it's an issue about education and people. It's about the millions of people who come through there every year and learn that it's okay to abuse nature. As long as we call it education and research, you can literally get away with murder.
With respect to the question of education at marine parks, it's bogus. It's basically like having Walt Disney tell you how rodents' biology works. It's fantasy. It's not real.
Well, that's going to wrap up this week's show. If anything you heard today inspires you to take action on behalf of marine mammals in captivity, I encourage you to reach out to Phil Demers or Ric O'Barry or one of the many organizations out there currently fighting for the rights of these animals. You can get a hold of Phil Demers at savesmooshi.com. If you're interested in Ric O'Barry and the work that he's doing, you can find that information at dolphinproject.net. And if you're particularly interested in orcas, you can go to orcarescues.org. The last thing before we get out of here, if you didn't notice, we have a new intro on the show written by my friend GDLK. Not only did he write us an intro, but he wrote us a whole song, which I'm going to go ahead and leave you with today. Make sure you tune in next week. From all of us at the Anoncast and Anonymous Headquarters, have a great week.
Greetings, world. We are Anonymous. We are Legion. We do not forgive. We do not forget. Respect us. We are Anonymous. We are Legion. We do not forgive. We do not forget.